In this video, we're going to be looking at the most complicated area of martial body training, and that is in the adaptation of our movement to produce complex spiral motion. Let's look at this spiral body. So the spiral body is the production of complicated or complex movement, and this complexity will often be hidden within seemingly simple, linear or common movements that we see in the martial arts. When you train with someone with highly developed movement skill, they can seem extraordinarily evasive. They can seem like they're able to dispel or adjust your attacks and lines of force with ease. And the feeling of highly developed complex movement can be quite disconcerting. This is what we're trying to replicate and embed in our bodies using the spiral body method. It's called the spiral body because the spiral is the apex of movement complexity for the human. We find it normally quite easy to move in linear ways, and it's very easy for a partner or opponent to stop linear motions. But as we move up complexity, it becomes harder for us to actually create, but B, it becomes much harder for our opponent to perceive or stop. The spiral body method is a progressive and structured way to produce spiral movement in our bodies, and it is a way of us moving ourselves up complexity at a gradual pace so that eventually spiral movement becomes second nature. Now, the progression of movement in the spiral body follows what I call pairing. Now, the easiest way that I can describe this is to think of a seesaw. A seesaw is a span with a point underneath it that is in the center. And as you push down on one side of the seesaw, the other side rises. So we have a sinking and rising direction, all within the confines of a single system, and they're both moving simultaneously and in harmony with one another. The reason I call it pairing is because it's important to remember that there's always a minimum of two things happening at the same time. So even though we may be working in circles or spirals, there must be at least two directions happening simultaneously for us to get this complexity that we're after. The way that we progress through the spiral body is that we start with what is called point-to-point or single joint movements. This is actually the normal way of moving. Next, we move into what I call linear pairing. Now, this is where 2 points of the limb are moving in opposite directions to each other, but on a flat or linear plane. So here we can see the forearm is moving where the hand is moving out and the elbow is moving in, and then reversing. But the center point in the middle of the forearm remains static. So this is an example of linear pairing in the forearm. Of course, linear pairing will move throughout the entire body. It's not limited to one length in the body. Then we move into circular pairing, and this is where the limb will move in circles but still maintain this equal opposite action. Now, this can be that the hand is tracking a circle and the elbow is tracking an opposite circle, or it could be that the whole limb is tracking a circle and there's a linear pairing within that whole limb circularity. But either way, we are now moving in circles with equal opposite actions happening. Finally, we look at spiraling. Now, this is circularity plus another axis of direction, and that will cause the circularity to open up into a spiral or a helix. This is the most complex movement pattern, and as we move this across the entire body, we see that every area of the body is moving in this corkscrewing, spiraling nature. So we have this very clear way of moving up movement complexity, and what happens when we do that is we start to embed this feeling of moving in spirals, circles and linear pairing so that it actually naturally occurs as we move. After a time, we're constantly turning and twisting all the tissues of the body. They start to take on this characteristic of twisting and spiraling. And this causes the body to naturally move in that way. The best people who can do this can actually make that spiral motion so small it's almost invisible. The movements may seem completely linear, but actually they are expressing this deep and condensed spiral in their action, so that when you touch them, they don't feel like they're moving normally. As we move with spirals, we're able to do opposite spirals across the body to produce extraordinarily stable but highly powerful movements. So we can express a very hard strike, for instance, but we're not leading ourselves out of our base to do so. We have this equal opposite spiral in the body that means that we're highly centered, but actually producing huge volumes of force as we move. So SpiralBody is extremely useful, but very difficult to train. And it takes a lot of practice and concerted effort to produce a real spiral body. So SpiralBody is one of the more difficult parts of martial body training, but it is extraordinarily fruitful and something that can be extremely fun to practice. So if you'd like to have a go at some SpiralBody methods, you can head over to martialbody.com and check out the SpiralBody Foundations course.